The Watership Down Podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There definitely will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down Podcast episode 199, in which we'll be looking at the portrayals of Bigwig, the warrior champion of Watership Down, since the publication of the original novel in 1972. This begins with his first portrayal in the 1978 film, and ends with the last version of Watership Down I have covered in this podcast, the 2018 Netflix miniseries. But first, I have a couple of emails to catch up on, as it has been about 4 weeks since the last episode. Again, I apologise for these gaps between episodes these days. Life has become a little more unpredictable than I have been used to for the last 3 years. New listener John Moore has been in touch with his reaction to the earlier episodes of the podcast. It's always great to hear people coming fresh to episodes that for me are ancient history now. It's a reminder that no matter how infrequent episodes may become, or may even stop altogether one day, all the episodes will still be there long into the future. John comments on the meaning of the word inlay, as well as the fact that the phrase "for Ella to cry" appears not in chapter 21, which it is named after, in which Holly tells of what happened to Sandalford Warren, but in chapter 17, The Shining Wire, in which Fiver calls the story he is about to tell about the precise nature of the Warren of the Snares, quote, "one for Ella to cry at," end quote. Thank you for your email, John, and welcome to the Owsler. Owsler member Andrew Stevens has also been in touch about the English crust punk band Fall of Ephrafa, whose music is themed around Watership Down's darker aspects. They formed in 2005 in Brighton, about 7 miles from where I live, and disbanded in 2009, having produced 3 albums titled Owsler, Elil and Inlay, known collectively as the Warren of the Snares trilogy. Andrew advises approaching the lyrics with caution, a warning I am happy to pass on in this non-explicit podcast. Thank you for the heads up, Andrew. Anyway, let's get back to Bigwig. The portrayal of Bigwig from 1978 to 2018. In my opinion, it is accurate to say that the best dramatic portrayal of Bigwig was his first in the 1978 film. Visually, he was portrayed as he is described in the book, his curious growth of fur on his head marking him out very clearly, while not being overdone. He was voiced by Michael Graham Cox, a relatively unknown actor who also voiced Boromir in the 1978 film of Lord of the Rings, as well as in the 1981 BBC Radio 4 serialisation. In episode 58, in which I introduced the 1978 film, I gave the example of his brief appearance in the war film A Bridge Too Far, 1977, as an example of his live-action film work. But the opinion of Wikipedia is that his career highlight was in the role of Palmer in Women in Love, 1969. Tragically, Cox died at my age at the time of writing, 57, in 1995. His Bigwig was truly in the spirit of the novel, and, as the first film portrayal of Watership Down is so close to the spirit of that novel, mostly just heavily summarising the plot, I will focus only on those aspects of the portrayal of Bigwig that differ from the novel in that film. The first difference from the novel for this Bigwig lies in his dealings with Captain Holly of the Sandalford Owsler. He has to tell an unpleasant Holly that he will deal with Hazel and Fiver when they ask to speak to the Threarar, and, as they speak to the Chief Rabbit, we see Bigwig grow nervous as to what the consequences will be for him. Having had his head bitten off by the Threarar, Bigwig decides to join those who leave Sandalford. After the Owsler detain most of the rabbits who intend to leave, Bigwig surprises the remaining 7 just before Holly's arrival, making it look for a moment as if he may be detaining them himself. He then attacks Holly after he turns up to arrest the remaining 7 rabbits, having not realised that Bigwig was present, rather than Holly turning up to arrest only Owsler members, as in the novel. This hidden Bigwig could have backed out of the entire plan once Holly showed up, as he is not under threat of arrest at all when he attacks Holly. At the River Emborn, Bigwig is less confrontational with Hazel than in the novel when he speaks of staying with Fiver and Pipkin. Much later, at the road, Bigwig nearly gets himself run over by a red sports car as he tries to demonstrate how Hrududil will not attack them. This is an additional comedic moment for the film, and was the first visual example of Bigwig as buffoon. Sadly, it would not be the last. The film's lost paragraph moment happens as they approach the bean field, which lies on the far side of the road here. But Bigwig's put down of Hazel being called Ra does not include his promise to stop fighting the day he calls him that. There is no crow attack for Bigwig to deal with. As they approach a derelict church, Bigwig calls it a man place. Later, when they are attacked by rats in the church, Bigwig has to fling one away after it latches onto the end of his ear, which must have smarted a bit. During the brief rebellion in the rain, Bigwig has to point out that they will be killed if they go back for wounding an Owsler officer. He does not resort to violence, and Cowslip's arrival interrupts the argument. Bigwig is a bit more assertive than in the novel in insisting they can defend themselves to Cowslip. He then undermines Hazel a bit by leading them to this new warren. Once Fiver becomes terrified of the place, Bigwig only intervenes once, against Hazel's wishes, rather than helping him with Fiver 3 times. His mockery and condemnation of Fiver is his first moment of truly showing his temper in the film, and he is promptly snared. At this point, in this version, you could argue he has abandoned his warrior role and pays the price. After the visceral presentation of the snaring of Bigwig, during which 70s family cinema audience were treated to the sight of blood and froth emerging from his nose and mouth, his survival leads to their leaving immediately for Watership Down. There is no arrival of Strawberry to further annoy Bigwig. The rabbits have not even arrived at Watership Down when Bigwig has his terrifying encounter with the Black Rabbit of Inlay, which turns out to be a wounded and delirious Captain Holly. This happens in broad daylight in a ditch in the lane leading from Nothanger Farm, rather than at night in a ditch at the foot of Watership Down, and there is no Bluebell with Holly, who might have added to Bigwig's new Owsler. We are less clear here why Holly was so intent on finding Bigwig specifically, but his horrific accounts of the destruction of Sandalwood, as well as of his implausible encounter with Ephrafa, sets Bigwig's destiny as warrior for the rest of the film. No sooner have the 8 rabbits arrived on Watership Down, with its ready-made warren, than we are treated to Bigwig the buffoon again in his first meeting with Keehar, whose first yark causes a full-on cartoonish fear reaction from Bigwig. Here, a close relationship between Bigwig and Keehar does not seem to develop. Instead, they seem to trick Keehar into helping them find does, after Bigwig suddenly realises they haven't got any after Hazel points this out. How exactly Bigwig comedically barging past Keehar as he leaves a run, resulting in all of them being called stupid bunnies, is part of this trick is unclear. But, having been treated to a few wing slaps by Keehar, Bigwig turns to Hazel and says it is working, with a small smile on his face, though it may be Blackberry who says those words. Keehar's seeming not to return from his mission to find does results in the failed raid on Nothanger Farm, which Bigwig, strangely, is not involved in. Perhaps this is why this version of the raid fails so utterly. With Hazel shot and found by Fiver, and now recovering on Watership Down, Bigwig becomes relevant again as Keehar returns, having found Ephrafa, which Holly has already found. Bigwig prompts Holly to tell them more about Ephrafa and how he escaped from their fearsome Owsler with the help of a messenger from Frith on the Iron Road. In doing so, we briefly see a long shot of Bigwig meeting Woundwort from later in the film. Holly disabuses Bigwig of any notions of freedom in Ephrafa, emphasising how he only got away due to divine intervention, in contrast to the mutilated Blackavar, and Bigwig can be in little doubt as to exactly what he faces as they set off for Ephrafa, despite Holly's strong warnings. During the brief journey to Ephrafa, the episode with Bigwig leading a fox onto an Ephrafan wide patrol is portrayed well, and then they are at the bridge under the Iron Road, where, pursued by another wide patrol, Bigwig makes the decision to join Ephrafa there and then by allowing himself to be captured. He does not wait for the discovery of the punt at the test, as he does in the book, which means that he will be even more in the dark about the plan to get away. Hazel even starts to say it is too soon, but one look from the warrior is enough to convince him. Bigwig's introduction to Ephrafa and to Woundwort is a heavily truncated version of the book. He is brought in by Campion, one of the rabbits who think they captured him, and is marked by him as well. He is then placed under the supervision of none other than Vervain himself, who seems to be a mere mark captain here. Having met Blackavar again, as he was trying to escape with Heisenklay when Bigwig was captured, he notices Heisenklay. There is no awkward meeting with her group of rebellious does, nor does Bigwig have to send for her. Instead, there is a hurried, quiet encounter with her above ground, where Bigwig has to quickly gain her trust by mentioning Holly, who he knows she has met. Heisenthlay's psychic tendencies help convince her to trust him. Next, he meets with Kihar and just about manages to convey that the Watership Down rabbits need to meet him at the Iron Bridge just after sunset. This Bigwig has not been beyond this bridge, and Kihar, in his excitement, seems to fail to communicate the entire plan for getting away. This was fairly crucial information. Bigwig also tells Kihar that he must drive away any patrol that follows them. Next, another meeting with Heisenflay, underground, where Bigwig tells her to get as many rabbits as she can to the near hind mark at sunset, just before early Silflay. He adds that a bird will fight for them. Bigwig is just heading out again when he is interrupted by Woundwort. His interrogation is similar to the book, but does not cause a day's delay in the escape. Coming away from the meeting, Bigwig meets with Chervil, who has been downgraded from Mark Captain to one of Blackavar's guards, replacing Bartzia. And so it is Chervil who is attacked by Bigwig as the escape goes ahead. The unwarned Blackavar joins the escape, and Campion, who is told to watch Bigwig, immediately reports the escape to Woundwort. Rather than just pausing at the rail arch, here Bigwig waits there for Kihar to help them. So it is there that Woundwort catches up with him, and receives a brief torrent of abuse from the brave warrior who knows he is about to die, before Kihar seemingly emerges from the lightning to attack Woundwort. We see Bigwig kick away a rabbit that is probably Campion, and the escape continues. Bigwig meets with Silver, and even allows himself a pause to catchily scratch himself behind his ear, and agree that they did it, before the pursuit continues. At the test, Woundwort's hatred is all focused on Bigwig, before he shouts that he sees the bird again. Bigwig and Hazel run for the punt, and they float away. The journey back to Watership Down is brief and easy here, with Bigwig present as Hazel says goodbye to Kihar by moonlight, once the punt is gently grounded on the opposite bank some time later. No sooner is Bigwig back on Watership Down than the Ephraim Great Patrol arrives. His first question is where they are, a testament to his bravery. And Pipkin's suggestion they should leave is met with an angry look from Bigwig, who says that one or two Ephraimians will join him if he's for the Black Rabbit. When Hazel says he is going to meet with Woundwort, Bigwig offers to go with him. Fortunately, this is declined. Later on in the honeycomb, Bigwig reassures the others before Hazel arrives back at a run and the battle begins. When Fiver begins to have his episode, Bigwig looks angry rather than scared. As captain of Owsla, he is just concerned with the effect it will have on the others and tells Hazel to stop him. And then Fiver's fit reminds Hazel of Bigwig's words about a dog by the River Emborn, which we hear echoing. Instantly, Bigwig is asked for runners. Bigwig suggests Heisenflay, who joins the team of Blackberry and Dandelion from the book. Bigwig asks where he is going, but is just told to hold off the Afrafans and not give in. Elachera has shown him what to do. Bigwig blocks the run Hazel has used and moves with a recovered Fiver into another run, which is blocked. He seems not to see Blackavar, who stays behind. Above ground, Woundwort's entire focus is on finding the chief of this warren, Bigwig. There is no dialogue underground now, as we see Pipkin burying Bigwig in a dip in the floor of the run. Having slaughtered poor Blackavar, the bloody Woundwort is led to where Bigwig is buried by a terrified Pipkin, and the fight begins. It is not shown in anywhere near the detail described in the book, but is completely faithful to its spirit, a brutal fight to the death in a narrow space. Bigwig's attack throws Woundwort onto his back. Woundwort rakes Bigwig's face. Attacking Bigwig again, Bigwig launches at him from low down, tearing at Woundwort's throat. They end up side by side, clawing and tearing at each other. They pause and exchange jibes. Bigwig says he hopes he has impressed him. Woundwort says he told him he would kill him himself. Woundwort adds there is no white bird here as the fight continues. Woundwort gets Bigwig on his back. Bigwig manages to get up. Woundwort drives him back towards the dip in the run he emerged from, to dramatic music. Bigwig disengages, scuffs dirt in Woundwort's face and retreats behind the dip. And now Woundwort tries reasoning with Bigwig about throwing his life away. This is met with one word, Cracker. Woundwort tells him to come out. And Bigwig, without realising it, delivers his killer line about his chief having told him to defend this run. As he does so, we see the famous shot of the bloodied, exhausted but determined Bigwig. Woundwort takes in the horror of what he has just heard on his own. Here there is no sending Vervain in to finish the job. There is no time. And we see Bigwig for the last time in this film as a large dog arrives on Watership Down. And so the first examples of Bigwig the buffoon were committed to film in what is still his best portrayal. In his next portrayal, you might argue we were introduced to the first example of Bigwig the nice guy, which is another way in which he has been wrongly portrayed over the years. In the 1984 Australian radio play of Watership Down, Bigwig is, or rather sounds like, an upper-class retired British Army officer. He is introduced as being a captain in the Sandalford Owsler, in a version of the story in which Owslers have a lot more ranks than before. Having left with the others, this Bigwig is reluctant to cross the road rather than taking the lead. Later, after surviving being snared, he immediately acknowledges the leadership of Hazel Ra after he is elected as leader. Much later, Bigwig has to explain to Pipkin why they need does as they head off to Ephrafah. This may be the first example of Pipkin as being younger than the others rather than just smaller. Here, Bigwig is only told about his mission, it seems, when they reach the River Test. Once in Ephrafah, Bigwig is marked by teeth rather than claws, and his mission is truncated in much the same way as in the 1978 film. He does send for Heisensley, and there is explicit reference to his being a bit older than the other rabbits. During their detailed conversation, reference is made to Holly having promised to get her out of Ephrafah. After meeting with Kihar, Bigwig tells Blackavar about the plan, but in the only example of this Bigwig being nastier, says he will kill him if he betrays them. The escape is promptly thwarted by Woundwort interrupting Bigwig, and then Nell Filter is arrested, the first dramatic portrayal of this event. Bigwig isn't sure what to do until the very effectively described wink from one of Blackavar's mutilated eyes persuades him to go ahead immediately. With the does helping Bigwig fight the guards, the escape begins. Campion catches up with the escapees along with Bartzia, who Bigwig defeats out in the open rather than back at Ephrafah. Once back at Watership Down, Bigwig actually names Hazel as his chief during a pause in the fight with Woundwort, but in this version, Woundwort has not met the smaller Chief Rabbit, so the effect is still intimidating. Woundwort says to send Vervain in to finish Bigwig off, and then the dog arrives. In the 1996 sequel to Watership Down, Tales from Watership Down, Bigwig plays a relatively minor role at first. In Chapter 2, he argues with Fiver about whether or not Elacrera aged as a forerunner to the story of the three cows. He is also mentioned in the introductions to the stories told in Chapters 3 and 4, and is a little more involved in the unnerving run-up to the rabbit's ghost story in Chapter 6. In Speedwell's story, Bigwig is referred to as having climbed a tree. He becomes a little more involved, unsurprisingly, in Part 3, which is all set back on Watership Down. Bigwig is involved in discussions about the nature of Ephrafah, in which the mysterious secret river is mentioned by the enigmatic doe Vilthuril. Later we learn about Bigwig having persuaded Kihar to scout out a location for the new warren between Watership Down and Ephrafah. In doing so, Bigwig displays an awareness of the need to found this new warren before the one on Watership Down grows too large, as it lies right next to a path used by humans. Bigwig joins the expedition to the site of the new warren before Kihar brings a warning of approaching cold weather. With Watership Down blanketed in snow, Bigwig has a tense first meeting at the winter burrows with the huge doe Flyeth, during which he asks if she comes from the warren Thiniel that Vilthuril sensed in the secret river. This Bigwig is not afraid to use intelligence gathered by psychic rabbits. There is then more tension when a dead human is found nearby. Bigwig taking a more relaxed attitude towards the proximity of humans than the paranoid Flyeth. With the bad weather now past, the new warren project is restarted, with none other than Captain Avens, who Bigwig worked with at Ephrafah, as one of its new Owsler. Bigwig also warns Hazel that Flyeth could become a real problem. As Flyeth's paranoia about humans and the white blindness gets worse, Bigwig becomes convinced that she is trying to become Chief Rabbit and shockingly mentions killing her. Fortunately, Flyeth leaves with a group of Watership Down rabbits to found a new warren. Bigwig seems to have an issue with the idea of a female Chief Rabbit. However, Flyeth's influence results in Heisensley becoming joint chief with Hazel. Her joint leadership is immediately tested when some rabbits from Ephrafah go missing, while on their way to Watership Down when Hazel is elsewhere. Bigwig argues with Heisensley about her determination to find them, but her eventual success results in his calling her Heisensley Ra for the first time. Later, the rise of the maverick young rabbit Sandwort is met by Bigwig seeming to be more than willing to fight again. The possibility of Hazel's leadership being at risk if Bigwig fights Sandwort is mentioned. Fortunately, Sandwort's overconfidence is his undoing, and he is humbled after becoming trapped in a human-made pit. The arrival of the human-smelling stonecrop is the next challenge, and Bigwig counsels Hazel that he has to go. He even disagrees with Fiver. The eventual solution of Stonecrop joining the new warren works out rather well, as he scares away some attacking weasels with his smell. Richard Adams last wrote about Bigwig in the final chapter of Tales, where he goes on wide patrol with Campion, who has joined the warren on Watership Down, having become dissatisfied with leading Efrafa. The mutual respect between the two former enemies is made very clear. And so we go from one extreme, the last portrayal of Bigwig by his creator Richard Adams, to the other, the 1999 to 2001 TV series, in which Bigwig the buffoon comes into his own. This Bigwig has a far larger growth of fur on his head, more of a lion's mane really, and he is played almost purely for comic effect. This Bigwig is opinionated and arrogant. By the River Endbourne he patronises the young Pipkin before the arrival of a more vicious dog that actually attacks them. Later we learn that this Bigwig was a captain of Owsla at Sandalford, as well as Bigwig saying that the motto of the Owsla was "Who dares wins." Bigwig is reluctant to let the injured Keehar join them when they rescue him at Nuthanger Farm. Once on the down, Bigwig leads the opposition to Buck's digging, happy to leave this to the female Blackberry. But the arrival of a weasel, as well as Bigwig losing a game of bobstones over the issue, helps break down this opposition. Bigwig is brave though. He tries to insist that he should be the one to be sacrificed in a plan to trap the weasel, even though Keehar's friend Hannah the Mouse would be a far more sensible choice. In fact, he has to be pinned down to stop him. The success of the plan makes the conservative Bigwig admit that other animals can help them before Holly arrives on the down. Holly says he left another rabbit called Pimpernel at another warren. This is the warren of the snares, which has not featured before now. Bigwig is keen to go and get Pimpernel, anything to avoid digging, and when they arrive at the new warren he wants to stay there. Fiver's warnings annoy Bigwig, even though in this version he has already been proven right about Sandalford's destruction, making Bigwig seem just plain ignorant here. He pays for this by being snared, and having been saved, he leads an attack against the warren, actually attacking Cowslip. What persuades them to leave is the clear insanity of Cowslip, and Bigwig admits that being Owsla can mean you always think you're right. Back on Watership Down, Bigwig's buffoonery continues with his comic Owsla training, while newly arrived Strawberry annoys everyone with his laziness. However, Strawberry also warns them of a large warren nearby called Efrafa. There is tension between Bigwig's insistence on training and Blackberry's view that they need to dig in order to have a warren to defend. Bigwig's first encounter with Efrafans reinforces his view, and the warren is split between diggers and Owsla. And then Bigwig's unwillingness to listen to others places them all in jeopardy as he leads out another patrol. The combination of Hannah and Keehar proving essential in helping them to escape from the Efrafans. Bigwig has to admit digging is the priority, but insists this is different. This is defensive digging. This Bigwig's arrogance is truly something to behold. However, he is more sensible than Hazel for once when Hazel says he wants to confront the closer Efrafa immediately. Bigwig correctly says the warren needs to be finished first. By sheer luck, Hazel and Fiver get out of Efrafa, with Bigwig rustling bushes to make it look as if Efrafa is surrounded. Again, Bigwig is not involved in the raid on Nuthanger, and Fiver cautions Hazel not to be too Bigwigish. So now comes the proper raid on Efrafa, except that this one only aims to rescue Primrose and Blackavar. On the way to Efrafa, Bigwig leads a fox onto two Efrafans, but that is one of few similarities with the original. Bigwig is unpleasant towards Hazel after the fox incident and seems to take charge. Once at the test, and with the punt found, Bigwig leaves to infiltrate Efrafa without any plan to do so and without telling Hazel. Woundwort is immediately suspicious of him as he has a strange scent. Having made contact with Primrose and Blackavar, Bigwig is able to let Hazel know what he has done simply by talking loudly about it at the river test, where there are sentries. Vervain, the main villain beside Woundwort here, suspects Bigwig and has him arrested. However, Woundwort marks Bigwig and says his probationary period is over. The escape rapidly follows, with Bigwig, Primrose and Blackavar tunnelling their way to freedom. And Woundwort is left at the test, where he actually falls in. With the plot now moving decisively away from the original story, Bigwig now becomes a bit less buffoonish and takes charge of serious warren defences, and the weasel is decisively dealt with. He begins to train Hazel and Primrose's first kittens and is heavily involved in a raid on a fenced vegetable patch at Nuthanger Farm, which is guarded by a dog. At one point, true to the original Bigwig, he comments that reflection is for mill ponds. Hawkbit described him as having survived life so far due to being pure of heart. With this Efrafa a lot closer to Watership Down, Bigwig patrols near the enemy warren, using the secret entrance to the newly discovered caves beneath Watership Down as cover. He is very much the focus of the Efrafan patrols. The emphasis switches to misleading the Efrafans away from the location of Watership Down, and first friendly contact is made with Campion after his knight injured in the greenhouse with Hazel. Bigwig remains very suspicious of the Efrafan. Bigwig is very aware that they are not strong enough to directly confront Efrafa. This is very much an asymmetric war. They make contact with Campion again to try to persuade him to work with Watership Down, but Bigwig doubts that they will persuade an Efrafan Owsler officer to betray his chief. The game of cat and mouse begins over Campion's loyalties, with a faked Efrafan ambush, and Bigwig avoids letting Campion know where the secret entrance to Watership Down lies. He doesn't trust him yet. And then Pipkin is captured by Efrafa, as Season 1 closes. Bigwig wants to use military tactics to save Pipkin, but these will not work. That is until other local wildlife offer their help. At the exchange of prisoners, this help proves crucial, and even Bigwig is persuaded. Woundwort ends up trapped under a tree branch, and Bigwig, no longer so buffoonish, goes to finish him off, until the newly rescued Pipkin places himself in his way. Bigwig is furious as Woundwort survives, and he is right to be. The Warren of the Snares returns to the plot, as well as the apparently abandoned Redstone Warren, and Bigwig agrees that a new warren nearby might not be a bad idea. Bigwig joins in with the farcical journey to the Peak of Arta before getting back to business, rescuing Hickory and Marigold from the Warren of the Snares and taking them to Redstone. This leads unfortunately to Woundwort and Cowslip meeting, and to Campion being branded a traitor. There is another distraction from Efrafa as Bigwig comes to terms with having Bark the Badger as an ally, following Fiver and Pipkin's ill-advised foray to her orchard, and then Bigwig takes part properly in covert warfare as trickery is used to convince Woundwort that Vervain is mad, freeing Campion from his detention in the process. As winter arrives, Bigwig ends up falling through ice as they attempt to find Flayra for the Feast of Frith and encounter a fox. The need to find shelter for Bigwig leads to the discovery of the mysterious warren in the human maze, and also the discovery that not all humans want to harm rabbits. There is more distraction from Efrafa as two confidence tricksters arrive on Watership Down, briefly taking in Bigwig, followed by an invasion of sheep, which leads to the disgraceful misappropriation of the episode from the book where a dog is led onto the down. Only this time it is a sheepdog, and Bigwig takes part, rather than being underground fighting Woundwort to the death. Bigwig's nervousness about Efrafa leads him to become too overbearing as they try to help re-establish Redstone Warren, and he alienates Hannah the Mouse. Having tried to rescue her, resulting in her having to rescue him from an owl, Bigwig seems to realise he went too far. The discovery of the secret entrance to Watership Down leads to the nearest this version gets to Bigwig's fight with Woundwort in the Warren at Watership Down. Unfortunately, here Woundwort seems to get the better of Bigwig, and it is only the intervention of Campion that saves him. The confused Campion then saves Woundwort from the trap laid for him and is apparently killed. And Season 2 closes. In Season 3, things on the whole get a bit darker, unlike Bigwig's mane, which becomes lighter in colour. Bigwig suggests taking the war directly to Efrafa, earning a rebuke from Hazel as he says this will be glorious. This Bigwig is ruthless and also prepared to listen to advice about how to be even more so. He has no qualms about employing the local wildlife, and Efrafa is completely destroyed. In the process, Woundwort is apparently killed. Back on Watership Down, Bigwig finds it very difficult to get along with the newly surviving Efrafans who join them, some of whom do seem to lack manners. However, he also saves an Efrafan from a weasel while on patrol. Eventually, the Efrafans leave to form a new warren under their new leader, Moss. With the threat seemingly past, Bigwig's training of his Owsler comes into question as the junior and comedy Owslers emerge, the former outperforming the latter. Meanwhile, Pipkin seems to be absent a lot these days, and is seen performing a kick that Bigwig only ever saw Campion do. The junior Owsler's first patrol results in the discovery of Scree the Hawk, who will shortly replace Kehar, an innovation Bigwig comes round to fairly easily. Fiver has said Woundwort is still alive, and there are hints that Campion may still be alive as well. Things are getting very serious once again. After visiting Redstone again, Bigwig comes across Campion's scent, and Pipkin confesses he has been helping him. As a result, Blackberry goes missing, and Bigwig has to track her with Hazel. They eventually find her after encountering a human poacher. She confirms Campion is alive, but very much changed. The arrival of Kehar with his new annoying mate, Gluck, who takes to Bigwig, results in Kehar's departure with her, much to Bigwig's relief. The destruction of Redstone Warren at the hands of human road builders reminds Bigwig of the destruction of Sandalford, and he helps to rescue the survivors. Meanwhile, a lot is going on away from Watership Down that Bigwig knows nothing of, but he does learn that Woundwort is indeed still alive, and that Vervain is with him. Indeed, they had taken over Redstone for a while. Primrose and Blackberry have gone missing, and Bigwig joins Hazel and Fiver to track them, assuming they have gone to track the two Ephrathans. They find them too late, and Blackberry is captured by a patrol from the newly discovered terrible warren called Darkhaven. Bigwig briefly pretends to fight Campion to provide cover for the others to get away. The realisation that Silverweed is now working for Woundwort at Darkhaven and can see through Fiver's eyes results in Bigwig joining the small party to get him out of Darkhaven. This proves easier than expected, as Fiver manages to control Silverweed for long enough to get him out. Hannah the Mouse's announcement that she has obtained crucial magic from a hedge wizard fails to impress Bigwig. Neither does Hawkbit, attempting to use Silverweed to manipulate him so they don't have to work so hard on the defences of Watership Down. He manages to persuade the others to trick the lazy rabbits Hawkbit and Dandelion that no one can see them, as a punishment. Later on, while they're on patrol near Darkhaven, a doe falls down a slope unconscious. Bigwig insists they must rescue her and carries her back to Watership Down. This doe is Spartina from Darkhaven, and she is a spy. She intimidates Silverweed into concealing her true purpose, and for the first time in the Watership Down universe, Bigwig falls for a doe. Spartina attempts to get back to Darkhaven but is captured, and Silverweed reveals to Bigwig that she is a spy. But she has in fact changed, having seen Watership Down for herself. Bigwig is invited to share Silverweed's magic so he can see what lies in Spartina's heart, and it terrifies him, even though at the end he sees them together and seemingly happy. But he now knows that Blackberry is in danger in Darkhaven because of Spartina, and that she must be allowed to return to save her. Bigwig is deeply unhappy about leaving three allies of theirs in Darkhaven, Blackberry, Campion and Spartina, but Hazel says he has to think of the whole warren. Everything now becomes focused on the direct defence of Watership Down, or Kaya Watership as I called it when covering this part of the series. Bigwig continues to use harsh discipline and against the lazier and more dishonest of those under his command. And then the three missing rabbits arrive back on Watership Down, thanks to Hannah the Mouse and Scree the Hawk. Bigwig is overjoyed and even pays Hannah a compliment, but they have escaped from the army of Darkhaven, who are on their way to Watership Down. The first battle at Kaya Watership, with more help from local wildlife, results in the Ephrathans being repelled, for now. But Bigwig realises their position is very precarious. He decides to go and fight Woundwort. If he wins, he will become the new leader of Darkhaven. But this will be a very different fight to the one in the book, and we have seen Woundwort apparently beat him once already. This is the Bigwig we know, ready to die in a last-ditch attempt to save his comrades. Bigwig arrives among the army of Darkhaven apparently cheerful, but the fight is a foregone conclusion. Perhaps he hoped to at least injure Woundwort. As the last desperate battle is ended by Silverweed using the magic he stole from Hannah, Bigwig miraculously arrives back on Watership Down limping, having somehow survived his fight with Woundwort. He is reunited with his love Spartina, and is about to find out what happened when the terrible price Silverweed has paid for using the magic is revealed. He is now old, but happy that the rabbits of Watership Down are safe. Here it is not Hazel Ra who has saved the day, or indeed Bigwig the warrior. But we will come back to this subject another time. In the 2002 BBC radio play of Watership Down, Bigwig is a little too nice. As an interesting feature, he is also portrayed with a mild West Country accent. We hear his resignation from the Sandalford Owsler portrayed dramatically for the first time. At the River Emborne, he has no issue with swimming the river. There is no biting of hawkbit on the common, and he does not get angry at Fiver at the Warren of the Snares at all. His friendship with Keyhart is portrayed, and Bigwig's journey to Ephraffa is uncomplicated by foxes or inappropriate tales of Ellacrera. Once in Ephraffa, he acts with a lack of caution in making contact with those, and, once back on Watership Down, his fight with Woundwort is a far less unpleasant experience for him, as he seems to chase Woundwort back into the honeycomb almost straight away. The 2016 BBC radio play has a far darker tone overall, and a Bigwig to match it. Although he is no thug in this version, and his character is more or less as it is in the book, his overall demeanour from what we hear of him is far more overtly tough, with a slightly slurred regional South East England accent. He sounds like someone you wouldn't want to mess with. When this Bigwig attacks Holly, you hear the viciousness of his voice. However, later he still doesn't bite Hawkbit on the common, though he does have a go at him. He is not as unpleasant to Fiver at the Warren of the Snares as in the book. He actually apologises for having to leave one of the hatch rabbits behind, and his greeting of Hazel back on the down after being shot is very true to the book. In Ephraffa, Campion actually introduces Bigwig to the rebellious does, and, once back on the down, Bigwig's exhausting fight with Woundwort is very true to the book, Bigwig's voice conveying well what he is going through. And so we come to the latest portrayal of Bigwig on film. The 2018 Netflix version, in which the acting talents of Star Wars actor John Boyega are, in my opinion, largely wasted in a script that makes Bigwig basically a bad-tempered, sarcastic thug, completely missing the point of his character. His first words to Hazel are "go away," and he lets him think he is with Holly at first when the Owls arrive to arrest all the Leavers. On the journey to Watership Down, this Bigwig never misses a chance to demean Hazel, who quietly tolerates this on the whole. At a derelict church, a crow attack ends with Bigwig killing a crow, and he makes out the Hazel has contributed nothing just before the arrival at the Warren of the Snares. He also makes sure he has an audience for this. Once at the Warren of the Snares, Bigwig seems to accept Hazel as leader, but still has a go at him about Fiver's behaviour ruining things for everyone else. And when Fiver runs away from Silverweed's poem, Bigwig actually pins Hazel to the ground, telling him they are both finished here. Bigwig's snaring mellows his attitude towards the two brothers, but his whole demeanour during the journey to Watership Down has been one that caters to a modern audience's thirst for conflict, rather than the calmer, more measured Bigwig of the book, with episodes such as the escape down the River Emborne from the Sandalford Owsler giving him additional opportunities for aggression. Once on Watership Down, as soon as the doe problem becomes apparent, Bigwig is back to blaming Hazel for everything, and it is pressure from Bigwig that precipitates the raid on Nuthanger Farm. At the farm, having insisted he is always alert, Bigwig fails to see the approach of a cat. To his credit, he takes it on once attacked. And when he has a go at Hazel for being scared, Hazel's temper at last breaks, shutting Bigwig up for the first time. The second attempt at the raid results in the ridiculous entering of the farmhouse, with Bigwig eventually having to fight the cat again on the conservatory roof. With Hazel shot and missing, Bigwig tries to take charge, but he seems not to be trusted with his temperament. It is down to Holly, freshly escaped from Ephraffa, to point this out, and Bluebell backs him. With Clover kidnapped in the fog by Ephraffans, they set off back to Ephraffa. But this Bigwig has not befriended the more unpleasant Keyhart, and has to suggest himself for infiltrating Ephraffa, with Hazel reluctant to agree. Bigwig is therefore required to pretend he is a storyteller, which he very much is not, placing him at real risk of breaking his cover. Bigwig is led to Ephraffa by Keyhart without realising how close he is. Not very clever of him, really. Bigwig's pointless storytelling cover results in him getting hit fairly soon, and he manages to keep his cool. Due to his size, he is recruited for the Owsler anyway, which is just as well, as he otherwise wouldn't have had the necessary freedom of movement for his task. His contact with the does is effective, but a rushed escape plan results in failure, and draws suspicion towards Bigwig, unsurprisingly. The loathsome Captain Orkis has his eyes on Bigwig now, and humiliates him by insisting on a story before telling his own of the fox Bigwig led onto a wide patrol. Bigwig is hit again. His position is very tenuous. It would have been far better if he had been introduced as the fighter he actually is. He is required to kill Heisenflay to prove his loyalty, and at last he snaps, attacking Sainfoin, who is meant to be ensuring he does as ordered. And with that, the second escape attempt from Ephraffa, entirely unplanned, is on. The Afrafans quickly catch up, and the escapees are trapped at the Iron Bridge until Kihar arrives. The bizarre escape to Overton ensues, with the Afrafans giving up far too easily, and after an almost friendly goodbye from Kihar at the River Test, Bigwig and the others set off back to Watership Down. The female Strawberry is especially happy to see Bigwig return, and it seems she is to be his new Spartina. But then the Great Patrol arrives on Watership Down, in one of the most effective sequences of this version. The Battle of Watership Down begins with Bigwig guarding one of 3 open runs in this more dramatic battle, until they are eventually driven back to the honeycomb. When Hazel has his big idea, he actually tells Bigwig to use the line about defending the burrow for his chief. Bigwig is left to fight Woundwort in the open space of the honeycomb rather than in a more easily defended run. He does bury himself in the floor so he can use a surprise attack, but there the similarities end. Somehow, Bigwig manages to get the better of this even larger than usual Woundwort, who towered over him at the Iron Bridge. They fight among the roots that hold up the roof until Woundwort, exhausted at last, offers Bigwig command of any mark. And that is when Bigwig delivers his killer line, along with the Lapine curse for stinking chiefs. Having withdrawn to above ground, Woundwort is faced with Bigwig almost coming into the open. Here Bigwig is at even more of a disadvantage than before, but it does mean that he gets to see the arrival of the dog. And Bigwig actually says the phrase, Hazel Ra. As this version of Watership Down approaches its close, we are treated to the sight of Bigwig and Strawberry's young kittens collecting worms from the returning Kihar. This Bigwig's days of thuggery are well and truly over. And so, barring the graphic novel, we have come right up to date with the portrayals of Bigwig in the half-century since the original novel was published. To be fair, the first examples of Bigwig the Buffoon appeared in the 1978 film, but these were incidental and did not really detract from his fundamental character in the film, which remains the closest to the book. But the further away we get from the world war that seems to have inspired his militaristic character, the worse his portrayals seem to get. In the 1984 radio play, he is still definitely military in character, but he is also English upper class and a bit old, almost to the point of buffoonery. In Tales from Watership Down, Richard Adams tried to revisit the character of Bigwig with some success, though there is inevitably a paranoia around whether an author can truly recreate such an important character of theirs after a quarter of a century. His ruthlessness in being prepared to advocate the killing of Flyath did ring true for me, as did his friendship with Campion. But I do know views vary on this one. The Bigwig of the 1999 TV series is true buffoonery aimed at children, though with flashes of the old Bigwig, which grow more frequent as the series progresses. The 2002 radio play managed the trick of making Bigwig too nice, which was certainly original, and I am in hindsight a real fan of his portrayal in the 2016 radio play. This Bigwig sounds like a vicious thug, but actually isn't, unless he really needs to be. And then we come to Netflix, who just made Bigwig thoroughly unlikable and the kind of rabbit you can understand Hazel being nervous about bringing along with them. The Bigwig of the novel's initial disdain for Hazel's leadership is gentle but assertive, with an edge of good old British banter. Here it is just sadistic and performative, and seemingly designed to speak to a perception of a modern audience. Which you might argue is a sad comment on how society, or at least the perception of society, has changed in the half a century since the publication of Watership Down. Poor old Bigwig, who was prepared to suffer so much to protect his comrades and give them a better life, in turn deserves better. As do all those who, for the right reasons, follow the way of the warrior. Next time, having reached episode 200, we introduce the Watership Down Podcast Index.